I'm your lecturer, John Edmiston, and you should be a student in the Theology of Technology course at City Vision University. And this slideshare is part of your course, Theology of Technology. And in this slideshare, we'll be looking at some of the major issues, some of the things that you ought to be thinking about as you're going through this course. Now, this slideshare isn't a presentation of our Theology of Technology. Rather, it's a series of provocative slides to help you spark your thinking in various directions. It looks at some of the major issues. It doesn't solve them. It doesn't resolve them. It just presents them to you. And I hope by the end of this slideshare, you'll have the view that the theology of technology is really, really important. It's part of your Christian theology. It's part of the way you should operate in the world in today's thing. We'll see that so many of the issues plaguing us today, some of the most vital issues for the Christian church, involve a right application of the theology of technology. So this is very fast. We'll be going through 20 slides, hopefully in about an hour or so. And as you look at these slides, I want you to think divergently in as many possible directions as you can, so that later on, as you read the textbooks, as you read the scriptures, as you pray and think about these things, these ideas might be seeds for further contemplation and thought. Because I want you eventually to develop your own theology of technology, and not just that of John Dyer or myself or someone else like that. So, with no further ado, let's start. Creation. Technology was part of human work given at creation. And God gave Adam a digging stick, and he told him to cultivate the garden. That digging stick was the original piece of technology, and God gave it to man to do that. Later on, of course, the technology of clothing was introduced after the fall. And then later on, even further than that, we have Cain. He invents music and all sorts of metalwork and craftsmanship because he's alienated from the ground. He has to make his living in non-agricultural ways. He becomes the leader of a nomadic tribe, and that tribe creates tools and music because it now isn't getting anything out of the ground. It has to think of these things as well. Now, technology involves a certain use of human creative abilities, and it enables us to be co-creators with God. As we develop our technology, we learn to rule and reign with Christ. At least that's the ideal. Now, ruling and reigning with Christ is often thought of as being some sort of a city up there made of gold with big pearl things, and we go in there and we receive a little crown and we sit on the throne and we rule and reign with Christ. Well, that's a metaphor. Ruling and reigning with Christ is simply being in control. In other words, if you rule and reign, you're in control, you give a command and things happen. So when Jesus was in the middle of a large storm, he could give a command and the storm would be still because he was in charge. He was ruling and reigning over creation at that point. He was able to command demons and they would come out because he was ruling and reigning over the spirit world at that point. He could command lepers to be healed because he ruled and reigned over the human body and over disease and over affliction and could restore it to wholeness. So ruling and reigning with Christ means that we do the things that God wants done, and we have authority over creation, over illness, over demons, over spirits, over the winds and the waves, and we bring them into the state that God desires. In other words, the storm had to be stilled and brought into the state that God desired, so Jesus said, "Peace, be still." And in some cases, such as the raising of Lazarus, God wanted Lazarus alive, and the command Lazarus came forth. Jesus ruled, he reigned, he had authority. Lazarus came forth, he came into life. And we will have the authority to bring life to the dead. And God's called us to cleanse lepers, heal the sick, cast out demons, and even raise the dead. And that's what it means to rule and reign with Christ, to be in control, to have command, to be able to say to the mountain, "Mountain, be moved." Now, as part of our ruling and reigning with Christ, as part of this spiritual authority we're to have technological authority. We're to develop power in technology so we can take authority over the evils in creation, such as disease, such as poverty, such as the things where creation has gone wrong, and we can subdue the earth. And we can show our authority in a constructive way, bringing God's will and God's kingdom into place. So we become co-creators with God, and we rule and reign. We take control on God's behalf, not in our own behalf, but we take control of creation in God's behalf to eliminate the disorder, the randomness, the evil, the chaos from it, and bring it into that state which God calls shalom. So that's part of our creation mandate, to subdue the earth, and technology enables us to do that in unique ways. So we're called to rule and reign with Christ, to be in charge of ourselves, but also to be in charge of the world around us. And that's what, as we proceed as servants of God, as we're faithful servants, we gain more and more power. And that's where the metaphors of the 5 cities, the 10 cities, and the talents and that come on in the Gospels there. So I want you to start thinking of yourself as a person with authority who's going to rule and reign with God, and part of that authority is going to come through your ability to use technology to take command of the world on God's behalf. And now, I'm not talking about guns, we're just talking about computers here. The fall. Technology developed rapidly after the fall as an expression of human independence from God and from the spiritual realms. Cain and his descendants pulled away from God, and they decided to build a city later on, and many chapters later in Babel. They decided to set up their own social norms, which were violent and terrible, and which were based on sheer human power, on brute force, on the heroes of old, that is, the dominant men of old, taking for themselves inappropriate wives, setting up kingdoms, building empires based on blood and violence. And at that point, technology fell into a technology of war, a technology of idolatry. A spiritual technology appears to have been there as well, though there's very thin references to that. Ultimately, this fallen technology became oppressive. It became full of war machines and ballistas and siege machines and things like that, and resulted in the Roman Empire and the cross. And eventually, crucifixion was barbaric, ugly, tormenting, and terrifying. And that's where Satan's technology goes. That's where evil technology goes. Not to subdue the earth for God, but to subdue the earth for an emperor, to subdue the earth for a political dominion, to subdue the earth on the behalf of the human ego. And ultimately, of course, that all that power passes over to the fallen angel Lucifer, otherwise known as Satan. So there's Luciferian power, which is the power to create fear in human hearts, to terrify people, and that power operates through idolatry and through various technologies. So in the book of Revelation, you will find that there is an evil power that can cause fire to come down from heaven, even in the sight of all. And they say of the beast, who can resist him? He has a tremendous technology power on his side. And in Daniel chapter 11, it says he worships a god of fortresses. That Hebrew word for fortresses can also be translated technology. The final dictator on this earth, otherwise known as the Antichrist, that final dictator will be a military dictator, and he will worship technology. He'll worship the power of military technology. And when technology gets fallen, it gets closely connected with idolatry and the manufacture and empowerment of graven images, pagan temples, and systems of creating illusions for worshippers. So finally, in Revelation, we see that there's this massive idol built for the beast, and then this idol is empowered to speak. It's given breath, and it can kill those who refuse to worship it. So there's this animated idol that is actually, I think, just an illusion created through technology, and this huge idol has power to destroy those who do not bow down to it. And this is part of the system of idols. Many of the ancient temples employed tricks, technological tricks, such as steam or water running through the temple, so that when a worshipper came up to the doors, they would mysteriously open wide, and with no human being there. And they'd say, oh, that's the god opening the door. It was a bit like Wizard of Oz kind of technology. It was just all hocus pocus, and the worshipper was impressed and believed that their god was powerful. So the fall has co-opted technology for the purposes of deception, oppression, fear, and on behalf of the ruling elite, or the emperor or king, or the priesthood, to keep people terrified and enslaved. And that's the negative use of technology. Redemption. Well, there's a good side to technology as well. It can be redeemed, and it can be part of our redemption. And technology has become part of God's merciful alleviation of the effects of the fall. Since the fall, we have had sickness, but God has raised up medical technology to alleviate sickness. The devil and evil people want to repress that kind of technology. They want to keep us in ignorance. And where you find demonic systems of power, there you also find incredible ignorance and an absence of medical technology and other technology. So God wants to redeem this earth. He wants to be merciful. He raises up technology such as educational technology, medical technology, communications technology, music, the arts, clothing was his first act of mercy, giving us clothes after the fall. Uh, the whole idea of God sheltering us and taking care of us, and of course the transportation and social infrastructure that makes life possible, makes life agreeable for us. A lot of that technology has been invented by good, godly people, and the inventors of this technology are often hidden. But in times of spiritual revival, there are also times of great inventiveness in the human nature. And people who are spiritually seeking God, they mightn't be formal evangelical Christians, but the people who are seeking God and seeking a higher way of living are often the inventors of technology for the disabled, and technology for very useful purposes. So it becomes part of our redemptive process, and it makes the effects of the fall less, and helps us, of course, to communicate the gospel around the world. So not only can we build wheelchairs or medical technology or design better systems of education, the Sunday school was a major revolution in education. It actually was started for training tradesmen, believe it or not, rather than teaching about Noah's Ark. So a lot of these things have come out of people who had great understanding of God. Florence Nightingale, who founded the nursing movement, again, she did that after she experienced a Christian revival. So we see God as moving in our midst, and that technology can be redeemed, and God uses it as part of his general redemption of humanity, and that includes both sharing technology that can share the gospel and technology that operates for social justice, healing, and education, and things like that. Technology is also part of the revelation of the knowledge and wisdom of God. Technology enables us to peer into what would otherwise be a mystery for us, such as the structure of the atom, or planets in outer space, or the structures of galaxies. It enables us to pull information into one place, such as a computer database, to analyze that information, to look into the chemistry of atoms and molecules, and things like the microscope, the telescope, the computer, even massive technology such as the Large Hadron Collider, help us to look into God's creation and to understand what he's doing, what he created. God is called the Logos, or the Word, which also means godly wisdom. God is full of godly wisdom, not just spiritual wisdom, not just religious wisdom, but the wisdom that is behind creation itself and behind the way history proceeds from one thing to the next. God is infinitely wise, and he calls us to share his wisdom. Christians are to be wise, not to be bumptious or ignorant. We are involved in entering into the wisdom of God, to the knowledge of God, to the deep things of God. And technology enables us to do that, e.g. the ability to preserve wisdom, such as in books. It can be written down and passed on to another generation. And technology helps us to transmit the wisdom that God's given to humanity to other people, outside of ourselves and down the generations. So God's wisdom is preserved. And technology also expresses our wisdom as an artifact. Now, for instance, a ballpoint pen would be called an artifact. That's what an archaeologist would call it. And a good ballpoint pen in some ways expresses God's wisdom and functionality, beauty, appropriateness, usefulness. And so this applies to all technology, neutral and good technology, not of course to evil and violent technology. But good technology helps us enter into the knowledge and wisdom of God, and we express ourselves in that way. A beautifully made crystal vase made by a wonderful craftsman can be an expression of what God's beauty is, his imagination is, his thought processes are in some way. We don't have to just make religious things all the time. We can make beautiful things that are of God. Art, music, and even good computers can be an expression of the knowledge and wisdom of God, and it's exciting walking in his footsteps. Isaac Newton would just say that, no, I haven't discovered anything, I'm just thinking God's thoughts after him. And so we participate in that thinking of God's thoughts after him. We participate in discovering the knowledge and wisdom of God and the beauty of his creation through technology. And so in our theology of technology, it also has to be a theology that includes an understanding of God's incredible wisdom, glory, and grace, and how that technology helps us to become a wise person and helps us in that aspect of our sanctification, entering into His wisdom and seeing things from God's perspective. And especially I've found some certain branches of mathematics made me stunned at the wisdom and symmetry of God and His complexity. So I don't know what that does for you, but whatever it is, think of God's knowledge and wisdom when you see technology. One of the big issues in theology of technology is the whole issue of ethics. Whether technology is good or evil or neutral, or whether it's good in this circumstance and evil in that circumstance, or whether it's neutral in this circumstance, good in that one and evil in the other. So we find that technology has a great ability to both amplify good and evil, or to be good or evil on its own. Some technologies seem to have no good purpose in human life. For instance, pornography. Who on earth wants that junk in their life? So the spread of pornography through the internet, through video, through various technological means is an obvious case of where technology is just being used for pure evil and needs to be filtered out. There's no benefit to that sort of rubbish at all. But we get into a lot of more complex issues when we think about a theology of technology. For instance, a shovel. Is a shovel good, bad, or evil? Well, most of the time a shovel is quite good. It's a helpful tool. You can do a lot of good, but if you bash someone over the head with the shovel, it becomes an instrument of evil at that point because it's being used with an evil motivation. And other times it's quite neutral. It's just sitting in the corner of the garage. So the shovel is, you'd say, well, it depends how it's being used and who's using it. The technology is not necessarily evil in itself. But as John Dyer argues, the shovel conditions us as we condition the shovel. The shovel will give us blisters on our hands. The shovel will do this. The shovel will strengthen us or weaken us. So the technology has an effect back on us. So as we look at the question of whether technology is good, evil, or neutral, we need to start with the position that technology is never just neutral. It conditions us. It conditions our world. If you don't believe that, wait till someone puts a huge development opposite your house and suddenly there's this huge highway going past where you were before. The technology you thought is neutral is now full of cars honking and screaming, and your peace and your tranquility has just been shattered. The technology is having an effect back on you. So we find that our whole condition, the condition of cities, the condition of societies, is affected by the technology in those cities, for good or for evil. And we live in a world that is slowly being massaged into a state of being, and a new state of being, through the technology which interconnects us. And we find that technology is just not in the use, it's also in the connections it creates between people and the opportunities it creates to do good or to do evil, or to tilt those opportunities one way or the other. Well, not only that, but the theology of technology has a bearing on some of the sharpest and most difficult ethical problems, the ones that appear all the time in the media or are discussed at elections by politicians. A lot of those problems that we as Christians react to and think about involve a technological component to them that has to be addressed as part of the mix. I'm not saying that the theology of technology is all of the story. There's political things, there's life issues, there's others. But we need to think about a lot of these things are also about how to correctly apply technology. For instance, genetic engineering, which is a huge issue. As we look at genetically modified foods, as we look at genetically modified crops, and perhaps even one day genetically modified people, how are we going to regulate that? Should human beings be cloned? Can we take a gene out of one person and put it into another person to stop a particular disease? What if we take genes out of some very strong people and put them into other people so we can create a super race of soldiers? So how far should genetic engineering go? Where is it good? Where is it evil? Where is it neutral? That's an application of the theology of technology. That's trying to evaluate the ethical implications of technology. And hardly anyone's really doing that. And when they do say something, they're pushed aside as trying to stop progress. Of course, nuclear war, that raised a huge question in the 1950s. When I was a young child, we were thought about digging nuclear bunkers even in Australia. So the fear that nuclear war creates, has the atomic bomb got any good use whatsoever? We need to debate that as nuclear proliferation as nuclear proliferation increases around the world. Also, the desirability of certain medical procedures, including abortion and euthanasia. At one level, abortion is the application of a medical procedure. There's medical tools, there's doctors, there's nurses, there's a surgery involved, and so is that procedure, is that medical procedure called abortion, is it good, is it evil, is it neutral? Is there times when an abortion is necessary, for instance, to save the life of the mother? Are times when abortion is absolutely evil, such as when a woman is having an abortion just to take revenge on her husband or boyfriend? It's an act of spite. So when is an abortion permissible? When is an abortion absolutely wicked act of hatred and spite? When is it simply something that a very confused person is doing? So we have to look at the issue of abortion as an issue of the application of a medical procedure to someone's life and to the life of the fetus. That is a child. Is it right to terminate the life of that child at that point? And as we look at ultrasounds, it's more and more convincing to us at this time that we are dealing with life. We are dealing with a viable life in the womb, and how do we apply technology in that situation? Is abortion ever justifiable? And that's a decision that involves thinking about how we do stuff with technology, because technology is involved in taking that child's life. Should abortion be legal, safe and rare, as President Clinton said, or should it be illegal? Is it such a technology that should never be deployed? And that's a very tough question, but it's a theology of technology question in part. Of course, we have electronic privacy issues. There are now 200 different firms that collect practically everything, from your credit card information to your emails, to your location of where your cell phone is at any particular point in time, to what you've purchased last. And firms such as Target, Google, Amazon can predict exactly what you're going to purchase. And in fact, it's said that Target knows when a woman is pregnant from her purchasing patterns, and then will target her with baby goods and strollers and things like that. As electronic privacy has got to the point where people are saying there is no more privacy, that everything you do is now known. Electronic privacy has vanished, and people don't even know how to address that issue ethically, and we need to. The church needs to address that. We need to have a theology of technology that applies to privacy, because there are some things that only us and God should know, especially issues where we're growing in life, we sin, we make mistakes. No one should know that except us and God, and we should be able to get over that without someone digging it up 15 years later from an embarrassing email. So we need to be able to really experience forgiveness, and part of experiencing forgiveness is to have true privacy. As I touched on this earlier, the availability and addictiveness of pornography is in part a technological issue, and in part it has a technological solution in applying filters to your cable TV, or filters to your internet, so that you don't have to experience pornography. And you might even have to cut off cable altogether, or to cut off your internet account altogether to limit exposure if that's a problem. There's the gaming subculture, where some games, particularly those that involve extreme violence or extreme participation in the occult, they can slowly condition people towards a darker spirituality. They can take them away from Christ into a fantasy world, where there is a loss of true identity and true contact with reality. But some games, of course, can help people to grow in conceptualizing God and conceptualizing themselves, and make them think, and can be quite provocative. So what's a Christian view of gaming, and how can gaming be used positively or negatively? And then we have very powerful issues such as transhumanism and posthumanism. What's humanity going to look like if we're so augmented by technology that, for instance, we have chips put into our brain, or if we have our sight improved so that we can look into ultraviolet and infrared wavelengths? What's going to happen when we're strongly genetically modified, or where our memories can be uploaded into a computer? Is that good? Is that evil? Is that trespassing some line that God has drawn? And will God judge that? Will God say that technology must never occur? Our humanity. This comes in from the last slide fairly obviously. How are human beings fundamentally created to be users of tools and technology? How important is it to you and I as human persons that we have access to technology? If we have no access, if we're just wandering around with just our arms and our legs and our teeth, so to speak, we don't have a shovel, we don't have a car, we don't have access to electricity, is our humanity diminished in some way? Are we less human for having our ability to be creative restricted? Because even if you're going to paint a picture, you need a paintbrush and some paint, and that's a technology. If you're going to create music, you need a violin or a guitar, and that's a technology. So how much less human are we without some basic technology in our life? And we're using technology in the broadest sense of the word now. Am I less human with or without my cell phone, or is my cell phone actually starting to diminish my humanity by constantly interrupting me as I'm trying to do this audio on this PowerPoint? So, does technology help us, interrupt us, diminish us? Does it plug us in or plug us out? Does it tune us in or tune us out to God? And how can the human spiritual imagination be expressed through technology? Technology is what helped build the cathedrals, as human spiritual imagination was there. There was Leonardo da Vinci, of course, painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He used technology. Of course, when he was sculpting, he was using a hammer and a chisel and a block of stone, or he's painting with the painting instruments of that day. And there's something going on. There was a deployment of technology by someone who had a powerful spiritual imagination. And so we find that in books, in poems, language in some sense, and writing and publishing help us to put the spiritual imagination of humanity on display. And that spiritual imagination can then connect with others through the internet, through email, through ebooks, and we can share our spiritual vision with one another. And as I hear your spiritual vision and you hear mine, we can become more human. We can provoke one another to good works. We can encourage one another in the things of the Lord. How is our humanity augmented by technology? Obviously, your humanity is augmented in some way when you pick up a pair of binoculars and you look out the window at a bird that is 400 yards away, and you can see all the colours, and you can see things that your eye cannot see. You get a telescope, you'll look at the stars. Now you can see things you couldn't see before. You could get a microscope and you can look into a drop of water and see things that the eye cannot see. And you're augmenting your humanity. You're getting extra senses through technology, and you're getting extra community through the internet. And so your natural abilities are enhanced. Your humanity is augmented through technology. How far can that go before you cease being recognizably human? Are you just someone plugged into the matrix? How can your humanity be alienated by technology? And how can we just be compartmentalized and reduced into cogs in the machine? So that you go to work, you sit in a cubicle, you type at a computer, you click a mouse, and mysteriously by clicking that mouse, things are supposed to happen. And you're just a cog in a machine, and when you click that mouse, something else happens, something further down the machine, and something else happens, and you are simply reduced to a component. And one day another computer will come along that has silicon instead of carbon-based life forming. It's plugged into your cubicle instead of you, and you're made redundant. That is a dehumanization of your role as a human being. Surely there's more to life, more to being God's representative on this earth than sitting in a cubicle and clicking away with the mouse. There's got to be more to it than that. So that is a diminishment of our humanity. Theology of technology leads us to think about the nature of community and how technology plays into Christian community. How is human community both formed and destroyed by technology? How does my being able to reach you through this slide share, you being able to go online to Moodle and read it and listen to it, how is that enhancing community? But on the other hand, how can technology destroy community as rumours are spread through Facebook and other means? How can technology amplify the differences and dissonances that are already present in humanity and lead to tremendous ruptures? And as communities interact online, we see flaming, we see acrimony between different religions and different points of view. And we find that community is formed and destroyed. as networks connect people with one another, and some of those people are different from one another. Also, technology enables us to have a false sense of self. We can create a false identity, an always positive identity, or an identity where we is enhanced through Photoshop. We're made to look better than we really are. And we can have a false sense of intimacy online, where we think, oh, that person's our best buddy, but we've never met them. We don't know their positive points, the negative points. We don't know if they snore or not. And we have a deceptive sense of community where we really think we know someone. We don't know them at all, because we're living in a false world, or a world of illusions. Yes, we know them to some extent, but that we have a false sense of intimacy. We think we really know them, when we only know of 1% or 2% of their personality. Technology has created network global communities, and these network global communities, such as people that I know in Europe or in Africa or in parts of Asia, these missionary friends of mine that I've met online, how does that community, how important is that to be compared to my family or to the local community I dwell in here in Carson, California? I'm actually far more involved with my international friends than I am with the community in Carson, California. They are the people that share my interests. They're my fellow missionaries. We think alike. There's not that many missionaries here in Carson. They've all moved to other parts of the United States that are a lot cheaper to live in. And so there's how does this global community relate to my family? When I travel overseas, what does my wife think about the invitation that I've received from, say, Mexico or somewhere? Is she impressed by that? And so, how does the network global community created by technology, such as the Skype or the telephone or the internet, how does that community relate to the other communities in my life? And what's technology done to the edges of our being and our sense of belonging? Do I belong here in America or in Australia, where I grew up? Do I have a being that is now diffused across the globe through my writing and my teaching? Where is my being? Is it like it was 300 or 400 years ago, centered in a particular village in a particular country at a particular time? Or does my being now extend through time, as people might pick up one of my books in 20, 30, 40 years' time? And that has my being started to extend into the future, and it's no longer synchronous. It's an asynchronous sense of being spoken to by others who have been in the past. And can modern community exist without modern technology? Can the city exist? Can Los Angeles exist without modern technology? Obviously not, because Los Angeles requires roads, it requires water, it requires gas, it requires garbage disposal services. So technology is necessary simply to build the infrastructure of modern community. You really can't get much beyond a village without modern technology. So certainly the motor car has greatly expanded the reach of how we can live and where we can live. And the railroad did the same thing. So modern community really can't exist without modern infrastructure. And so we have to think about communities that technology is causing us to build. And how does the gospel relate to those communities? And are those communities of God, or are those communities becoming increasingly dark? Temptation and addiction is a particular ethical issue that's been really brought to the forefront through the use and abuse of technology. And some of these, we're not just talking about the main temptations and addictions that we think of when we think of technology. There's also an addiction to excessive technological power. More technology makes the demand for even more. You have a gun and you have a castle, so the castle builds thicker walls to put out the cannon, so that you build a bigger cannon, and then the castle builds thicker walls. Eventually you get to the point where the cannons got so big that castle walls were no longer useful. The castle was no longer defensible, and you could lob mortars over the wall and blow everyone up anyway. So the point is that technology creates other technology which tends to get in loops of technological power, so that you get excessively powerful weapons, excessively powerful systems in society, driven by this need to have the most powerful thing, the most powerful computer, the most powerful missile, the most powerful aircraft. And this becomes an idolatry in itself. Such high-powered technologies often just exist for the human ego, rather than for any useful purpose. We have the temptation of using technology to play God, to terrify people, to lord it over them. And the banking system is perhaps one here where people are shifting billions and even trillions of dollars between banks at night, playing derivative games that can be played only with computers. And the global economy teeters here and there, and millions of people, in fact hundreds of millions of people, can be destroyed through a currency trading arrangement, such as happened in 1997 in the Asian currency crisis. So I was around at that time, and I saw the devastation that caused. So people play God with countries, with economies, with human lives through the use of technology, and that is what we call hubris, or sinful human pride. There's a temptation to take vanity and exclusiveness. People talk about phone shame. If you don't have the right brand of phone, then you're not really part of their group, part of their club. And this technological vanity and exclusiveness is a area of addiction to technology to enhance self-esteem. The temptation of coveting technology just because you have to have it. I have to have that. I have to have the latest computer. I have to have the latest gaming machine. I have to have that really hardcore piece of technology. And I admit to doing that occasionally. And I have to restrain myself from going out and buying the latest gadget. The addiction to false intimacy and pornography, which we discussed earlier. Addiction to gaming and false personas, which I touched on briefly in the ethics area. And addiction to idolatrous views of self, God, and others. Technology can create a view of self which is idolatrous. Here I am at my console, and I press this button and I end the world. That is playing God. That is setting yourself up as an idol. And it's a ridiculous and paranoid use of technology. Unfortunately, we're rapidly moving in that direction. Some medical technologies, some military technologies, some financial technologies are at the point where they're truly idolatrous. And we are worshipping the works of our hands. We have become addicted to our own egotistical expression of power and our own desire for dominance. The Christian work ethic. There used to be a thing called the Protestant work ethic. It has practically vanished. At the time of the Reformation and afterwards, there was a sense of people doing their daily work as unto the Lord. And there was an ethic of honesty, excellence, thrift, diligence, prudence, and professionalism. And this is traditionally called the Protestant work ethic. And it resulted in a lot of what we see in modern progress. It resulted in the rise of the corporation and people being able to work together outside of family units and outside of professional guilds. So the Protestant work ethic built a lot of Western civilization, and unfortunately that's getting undermined at the moment. How can we be truly honest in our use of technology? How can we be transparent? How can I live in a covenant relationship with you or with another person through my use of technology? And as we've become more paganized, how has technology enhanced the pagan notion that work should be effortless and can be accomplished by just clicking a mouse? That you can sit there above the hustle and bustle and pain and anguish of this world in your office, in your cubicle, click a mouse and something will happen on the factory floor. That we can play gods using a minimum physical effort to achieve a luxurious lifestyle. And that separates our work from the reality of our existence. It's flattering ourselves through our technology, and we want to be like gods on Mount Olympus, throwing magic balls of fire around the place and destroying the poor villages below. That is a paganization of technology. It's a paganization of the work ethic. How has technology both increased craftsmanship so that we can do wonderful things and produce wonderful products, and creativity, art, music, etc.? How has technology increased that, and for some people, and reduced it to practically zero for others? So that there are many, many people who are leading extremely dull lives. They just sit there in front of a TV day after day, looking at that screen with no craftsmanship, no creativity, just sort of plugged in to technology. And so we need to ask, how are some people's work being made robotic? How are some people reduced to complete meaninglessness while others have the chance at self-expression? Is that their choice, or is it also something they've been conditioned into through technology? Can you and I, as Christian technologists, consecrate our tech work to God? And how can we integrate tech work and the God space? This leads to the next thing, which is Sabbath, rest, and space for God. Is there a God space that we should keep sacred and holy? Should we have Sundays or Saturdays as a day of rest? Has technology made us rest less? Every now and then I try and enforce myself a tech Sabbath. I don't touch my cell phone on my computer on Sundays. This has become increasingly difficult. And sometimes I just need to be without email for a while, without text messages for a while, and just go and walk on the beach or go out somewhere and get away from technology. Am I driven by those emails and the urge to get things out all of a sudden? Is technology bringing our work home? When you leave the office and go home, there's work. There's that email from your boss. Is it giving us less time for God because we're constantly being interrupted by our technologies? Do we need that Sabbath from email, from social media, from Twitter? Do I really need to look at 100 tweets in my Twitter stream? Is that really necessary? Or can I just walk away from that and spend time with the Lord instead? And are our sacred spaces being commercialized, advertised, and invaded by the market through technology? Are we being just completely overwhelmed? So there's nowhere without an advertisement. There's nowhere that isn't commercialized. There's nowhere that's just us and God and our thoughts and our prayer life. And it's just buzzing in at us all the time. Buy this, buy that. Do this, do that. And there's no sense of sacred space or worshipfulness left because our world has now been totally invaded. What's happened to the Sabbath in the world of email? That's a theological question that you need to think about in your own life. The church. How is technology affecting the church, the local church and the wider church around the globe? Is the church a local community, or is it a virtual community, or is it a blend of both? When you email your church mates, when you text your friends from church, is that part of being church? Is technology augmented that social relationship that was church? Before you would have had to walk down the road and talk to your church mate, or have to go to the church and meet them there. But now you can text them, email them, show them a website. Is that enhancing the community of the church, or is it diffusing it? Is that church a local community, or does it include your missionaries that you've sent out from that church? You might be in Papua New Guinea. Are they now included as part of the church, and can they write back to the church via email and send in their prayer points? So are they now more included than they were before? Does the church have an edge in cyberspace? Does your local church, with its website, start reaching people that don't walk in on the pews? Does it start inviting people through its website into the community, the flesh and blood community that meets there on Sunday mornings or on Saturdays or whatever your worship services are? Can you genuinely have a cyber church? Can you do communion online? Is the sermon and worship that you hear online, is that valid? Can you do internet evangelism? I'll argue that you can. But you need to think about this. Is there such a thing as a cyber church? How important is the online presence of the local church? It's said that 85% of people will not go to a local church until they've checked out the website first. They want to be sure that it's okay. They want to check the doctrinal statement. They want to make sure the pastors are a reputable person. They want to see that there's a Sunday school for the children. They want to find out the worship times before they go there. So people will check you out online before they visit you face to face. And 85% of people will do that. So how important is that online presence of the local church? How important is it that the church can deploy technology to actively and accurately portray themselves to the world so that people can visit and become part of that community? And can the local church employ technology to connect and reconnect members to people that have wandered away and now they want to come back to God, they want to come back to the church? How can they email the pastor or send in a text? How can we connect and reconnect with one another as part of that group called the church? And what happens when the body of Christ is networked? When a church in Australia interacts with a church in Malaysia, which then interacts with a church in Chile? What are some of the productive conversations that can come about as we are aware of one another outside of our denominational walls or our national walls? What happens when Someone like myself who's a Pentecostal has a conversation with someone who's a Calvinist. Uh, can we respect one another? And as we learn to love one another with our different theologies and our different nationalities, is the body of Christ becoming completed partly through the internet. Doctrinal authority is a very interesting and thorny issue. Once upon a time, there were denominational officials such as archbishops or popes or cardinals or whatever, and they would write a policy or a theology statement. It would then be passed down to the bishops, who would then pass it on to the clergy, who would then pass it on to the lay people. And there was a very much a centralized system. There were confessions of faith that were recorded in books, and they were taught through catechisms, and there was a very clear line of doctrinal authority. But now, doctrinal authority is getting very dispersed because of the internet. When someone has a theological question, who do they ask? Do they ask Google or the pastor? I think most people ask Google. They will go to Google and say something like Theology of Technology, and you'll arrive at this course. And you may not ask your local pastor about the theology of technology. You will go to YouTube, you'll go to Google, you'll go to Bing, and you'll type in your query. You might even ask outline of the Gospel of Matthew and put that in there, and up it comes on Google. You haven't gone to ask your pastor about an outline for the Gospel of Matthew, or might be there in your study Bible, but you'll ask some source other than a denominational authority for that kind of information. So where do people search for spiritual knowledge and ask their spiritual questions, online or offline? I will argue that 90% of spiritual searching is done online. People, or in Christian bookstores or in places like that, they go to somewhere where the information is. And the information is online these days. And people will type in their query and they will say something like, what happens in the end times? And they will get all sorts of answers. Some accurate and some woefully inaccurate. Some from charlatans and some from respectable people. Now, this leads to many sources of spiritual authority. The average pastor is not the only source of authority in his congregation. They will also see people on television with some sort of teaching. They will see people online with another sort of teaching, people on YouTube, and they will have a diversity of points of view. Their theology, their spirituality will be a mixture of Christian, New Age, Buddhist, and whatever else they've picked up. They'll pick up a bit of Oprah Winfrey theology and a bit of Baptist theology, and they'll all mix it together. So there's multiple sources of spiritual authority for most believers, and they're picking and choosing. They're playing theological fruit salad, and they're going through the buffet line and picking what they like. And the role of the clergy now is to help them to know what's good and what's evil in that buffet, because a few things in that buffet are pretty toxic. So how much information does the local believer now have, and how does that affect the role of the local church, the denomination, and denominational officials, things like statements of faith and things coming down from head office? Because what head office says in the denomination doesn't matter much anymore. Do people really care what the Assemblies of God or Foursquare or Baptist denominational officials think? Some do, some don't. Now, and as believers, how do we validate the church or a denomination by its online reputation before trusting it? What if the online reputation's been messed up? What if some official has had an affair and now the whole denomination is distrusted? So we have to look at those kind of things about how our online reputation makes us believable or not ready to be believed, credible or lacking in credibility. And so a whole issue of doctrinal authority is mediated through technology. And we need to look at how technology is affecting the role of the church in the hierarchy of the church, in what we call ecclesiology. Spiritual gifts. Technology affects how we operate in the area of spiritual gifts. For instance, I have a spiritual gift of teaching, and I am teaching using technology. I'm using this slide share to reach you with my gift of teaching. And evangelism is now a multi-platform endeavor. Now evangelism isn't just standing on a street corner with a placard saying the end of the world is nigh. Some of the world's most effective evangelism is things such as the Jesus film, where a large group of people got together, made a wonderful film based on the Gospel of Luke, and that film was then translated into hundreds of different languages, perhaps thousands, I'm not sure, and has been shown around the world more than any other film with great evangelistic results. And of course, evangelists use microphones, they use speakers, they use technology, so that the gift of evangelism now involves technological teams setting up things in stadiums or proclaiming things on the internet and on mobile phones. So the gift of evangelism now involves a lot of technology. And to be an evangelist, to some extent, you've got to have tech people around you. So that happens with proclamation, such as from the pulpit. Obviously, we have lighting, we have sound in every church, almost. And exhortation. Can I exhort you through cyberspace? Can I exhort you through an email? How can the exhorter exhort more and more people using technology? And how is technology transforming the operation of the gift of spiritual leadership? Can someone who is a strong spiritual leader, a Rick Warren, then lead more people through writing a book and having it published? Or through sending out a Twitter stream or a Facebook page? Can they have a conference, and that conference will have thousands of people there because there's infrastructure to enable that conference to take place? How can spiritual leadership be disseminated around the world through the internet, through video? How can people participate in a conference that they can't physically attend, where they can hear a great spiritual leader speak through video and through telepresence? For instance, the gift of prophecy. It used to be a very rare gift, but now people go to YouTube and they see people that claim the gift of prophecy operating. They see their prophecies being made, they see their meetings, and suddenly this gift of prophecy that was very mysterious becomes a little more mainstream. Now some of those prophets seem to be alright, some of them seem to be saying very bizarre things. But the gift of prophecy is now brought into center stage because people go and they look at what these people are doing and they watch the videos. So a hidden and obscure gift has suddenly been raised to consciousness through the recording of these meetings, and they're being put on YouTube. And this leads to the question of false spiritual gifts, false teachers, false prophets, false apostles. Can they proliferate online because it's so hard to discern them? How can we know whether some of that stuff on YouTube is just utter rubbish? And so the spiritual gifts, including true spiritual gifts and false spiritual gifts, can be amplified through the use of technology. And our theology of technology needs to include a theology of discernment. How can we discern the true from the false? And how can technology both amplify the lie and amplify the truth? Evangelism. How can technology be involved in reaching the lost? As we said before, where do people go to ask faith questions? Well, these days they're asking them online. Where do people find information about religion, radio, TV, the internet? How can technology help inquirers to find God? Can we create a pathway for them? So, baby step by baby step, they can go from article to article, they can go onto their cell phone, and they can find God. They can find the truth about God. They can find the scriptures. Is the gospel still effective and powerful if it's encountered on a mobile phone or a computer? Does the gospel have to come from a human being? Is human presence required? I think many of us would agree that you can pick up a Bible in a hotel room and get saved. But can you read the scriptures on a mobile phone and be saved? Yes, you can, I think. Can you read the scriptures on a computer and get saved? Yes, many people have. What is the difference between an e-tract, that's a tract that's sent to you in an email or is sent to you via the internet or via text? What's the difference between an e-tract and, say, street witnessing, which is often illegal or many times offensive? Do we need to stand at the corner and pass out tracts to people who barely want them? Or can we send them to people who are inquiring through our mobile phones and through our websites? And they can get a tract today if they just click on a certain thing. And how is the gospel modified by the medium that presents it? When someone's listening to a radio evangelist, is that a different gospel experience than watching a TV evangelist? And is that a different gospel experience from the old tent meeting going forward at the front? And is that a different experience from receiving the gospel in the local church? So, is the gospel experience in some way modified by the technology that's used to present it? And that's a very thorny question, and one that you might want to think about as you're doing this course on the theology of technology. Missions. I'm a missionary, and I love using technology in missions. How can technology assist field missionaries, such as Bible translation? The first word processors were snapped up by Wycliffe Bible translators. It was such a difficult job doing Bible translation, shifting paragraphs around here and there. What about technology in the use of healthcare and in Bible teaching, using an overhead projector or LCD projector to teach people? How do we have good technology in the field in healthcare? So as missionaries, we need to have a certain mastery of technology so we can be effective and bless the people we're sent to. How can technology help us reach a group of people we cannot physically reach for health reasons or visa reasons? How can we share with people in North Korea? How can we beam radio signals in there and not get them jammed so that the church in North Korea can have the gospel? And when Jesus said go, does that include electronic going? When I send an email to someone, is that in a sense going to them with the gospel? And how can cross-cultural dialogue happen in cyberspace? When I'm talking to someone from another culture, from another way of thinking, I go to a chat room or meet someone from Kenya, and we have a dialogue about our different ways of being, our different ways of seeing things. Is that a real dialogue just because I'm not there in Kenya? Obviously, I would know a lot more if I was there in Kenya, but the dialogue can be begun, it can be started in cyberspace. And how does our digital presence affect how we are viewed when we arrive in country and do missions work? When you arrive somewhere and there's a rumor about you going around the internet, that can seriously affect your credibility there on the field. So your digital presence can enhance or detract from how you're received by the people that you are sent to. Justice. How can technology enable Christian activism for just causes? When something's going wrong, when something has been violated on this earth, can we set up an online petition? Can we send out emails? Can we send an email to a senator or a politician to get that corrected? How can Christians use technology to enhance God's presence, God's reign and rule on this earth, and to bring the powers on this earth into some sort of accountability for their unjust actions? Can technology enable people to network together and to form groups that can effectively stop the progress of evil on this earth? Can technology amplify and enforce injustice? Can the bad people get hold of technology and use it to terrify us and to intimidate us? Is the digital divide a major justice issue? Those who have technology and those who don't. How much more opportunity do people have if they've got technology? How much faster can they move through life if they've got appropriate technology? Is the gap between rich and poor financially also a gap technologically? And how important is it that we get wireless access and internet access out to communities so they can access the health information and educational information that they need? And some people are saying that internet access is now a human right. This has actually been put out to the United Nations and other things. People are beginning to say internet access is a human right. In order to function as a human being, you need to have internet access. That's a pretty strong statement. And that's, of course, a statement that many people are questioning. Has technology made governments too intrusive and too powerful? Does the reach of government justice departments or the police, has it exceeded what it should exceed? Do technologies such as millisecond share trading perpetuate economic injustice so people who have the fastest computers can make the most money? It's not the worthiness of your product, it's your ability to buy and sell shares, a virtual activity in itself. But it's done with such precision. Computer programs govern the economy. Is that just or is that unjust? And what can we do to correct that injustice? And another question, just one to think about, is hacking a valid form of non-violent Christian activism? Is hacking some oppressive regime's website something that a Christian activist should do? You might say yes, you might say no, but think about it. And it comes into your theology of technology. Can you use technology to stop evil? At what point can you use that technology, and how far can you go using technology to stop the proliferation of evil? Economics. How is wealth created and distributed in a high-tech world? How much of our wealth is flowing along wires between banks? How much of our wealth is created and destroyed by technology? A couple of years ago, there was a glitch on the stock exchange, and a lot of computers suddenly started selling shares. Billions, I think maybe trillions of dollars was wiped off the stock market for a while until that glitch was corrected. A technological glitch resulted in an economic downturn temporarily until the stock exchange decided to stop the trading and things eventually corrected. But technology and wealth are very, very closely connected these days. How has wealth moved around the globe? It's not moved around in sailing ships anymore. It's not moved around in boxcars full of gold. Wealth is moved around via electrons from one bank account to the next. Does God care that global economics is now a digital game dependent on big data and analytics? If I can figure out how you're trading and you can figure out how I'm trading and what's going to be up or down in a few months' time, then economics becomes a digital game. In fact, someone I think in Dallas has showed that the longest time that you should hold a share is 20 minutes. So that's correct. They're saying that holding your shares for long periods of time is not a good strategy. You should only buy a share for 20 minutes, and in that time it should change 1% of its value up or down depending on your strategy. And that once you've got that 1 or 2%, then you should immediately sell that share. That is not what share trading was invented to do, but that's what it's become through the use of technology. And is the replacement of middle-class jobs by technology an issue for the church? Can we say this is damaging the welfare of the households in this church? This approach to outsourcing labor, this computerization of jobs, is destroying cities such as Detroit and other places like that. So at what point is technology having a negative economic impact to such a point that it's unjust and the church should stand up and speak about it? Culture clashes and reconciliation. YouTube videos, cartoons published in newspapers have suddenly zoomed around the world and they're causing riots. What is funny to one person is offensive to another. So we're finding that there's incredible intolerance for what one culture produces by another culture. And they're bumping into each other now through the internet and through the spread of video. And so ideas from one culture that are acceptable in one culture can travel across the world at the speed of light and then negatively impact another culture such that people can get killed. So how are the perceptions of electronic media fueling clashes of cultures and ideologies? How are major ideologies able to terrify the media into submission? How can technology help with creating empathy, dialogue, understanding and peacemaking? Perhaps if we keep talking, we'll sort out some of these differences. We'll learn to put up with one another. Or will we just create a gigantic war? Can we have internet-based peacemaking efforts? Can we make peace with one another through a global village? Can we look at one another in the eye as part of a cyber community and say, yes, I'm going to get on with you. You're going to be my brother. You're going to be my sister. You might live in a different country. You might believe in a different religion. You might have a different way of doing things. You might have a different economic system. But you're a human being and I'm a human being and I recognize your humanity. And I can do that through Skype, through the internet, through the mobile phone, through whatever technology, and we can start to come to terms with one another. So how important is technology? How important is internet access into getting us all connected into a global village and eventually making peace? Or will we just blow up? How can technology assist with urban issues such as racial reconciliation by providing spaces for discussion? Sometimes face-to-face discussion just cannot occur. People have come to hate each other so deeply that they really cannot be in the same room with one another. Can they tentatively start discussing things in cyberspace in a chat room? Can people be introduced to one another bit by bit by bit and eventually overcome the hostilities and become more aware of each other? Some good television programs have introduced lifestyles to us that were alien to us before, and we've begun to empathize with them and understand them and to be more tolerant of them. And that's where a good documentary comes in. It takes us into someone else's world and introduces us to their point of view, so we are more prepared to be reconciled with them, more prepared to regard them as fellow human beings. So what are some of the future challenges as we try and think through this issue of theology of technology, so we can be informed and we can form those in our churches and our mission agencies how to think and how important technology is to the whole field of theology. Of course, we've mentioned genetic engineering, transhumanism and posthumanism. These are things that are going to dominate the landscape very soon as we start altering ourselves as people. Aging in medical care. At what point do you stop using technology? At what point do you say, we are going to switch off this machine and you are going to die. At what point do we say, no, we can't afford that treatment for that person, and this piece of technology cannot be allocated to that person at this time? Where do we make those decisions? How do we handle the increasingly intrusive technologies of big data, such as the huge databases that I've mentioned earlier? This is a challenge for theologians. What are the limits on data? Can we speak to legislators and say, God says that there is a certain amount of human privacy that is required, and you will destroy us as human beings if you go beyond that line. If you take away our privacy, you're also taking away our humanity. Augmented reality. How much should we be in contact with reality? Should we be having Google Glasses with advertisements flashed onto them all the time? Should we be looking at a world that is constructed around us that isn't really real? And some people seem to dwell in a world that is so electronically augmented they have little idea of what's really there. Not too many people, but some people are like that. They live in a world that is almost entirely virtual. And artificial intelligence and a thing called the singularity. I will look at some of his Werner Vinge's and Ray Kurzweil's work on the singularity later. That's where there's a technological explosion where society is fundamentally altered by human-level artificial intelligence. Is that going to happen ever? And if it does, how will that transform us? Well, there's some of the challenges. There's some of the things about theology of technology that we need to think about. What does God say about these things? What does God say about genetic engineering? What's the Bible say about it? What does God say about transhumanism, posthumanism, and privacy? How can we develop a theology to tackle all these things? It's an exciting age we're living in, but it's going to involve some very difficult thinking. Things that are not in the normal theology textbook. And we're going to have to do that thinking for the church. And I invite you into that journey in this subject. I hope you really enjoy it. God bless. Thank you.